Hello everybody, this is Chief Paul Rickard, and this is the September edition of Coffee with the Chief. And we're really excited to be able to have our current Orange County District Attorney Dave Hoovler join us. And we're going to chat with Dave for the next half hour or so about things that are going on in his office and in Orange County and in New York State. So welcome, glad everyone could join us. Dave, thanks for coming on today. And I know probably a lot of people know you, but for those that don't, why don't you just give us a little introduction of yourself?
Well, Chief Paul, as I know you, thanks for having me on the show. I am the district attorney here in Orange County. I've been so since 2014. I live in the town of Deer Park with my wife. We raised 3 kids. They're all out of the house now. The last 2 are still in college, so I stay pretty busy with them. As I said, I've been in prosecution for as the DA since 2014, but I got almost 20 years now in the prosecution field. A little bit of time I was a lawyer, I was in private practice. I did some time as a federal prosecutor, and at the beginning of my career I was a police officer, so I've kind of covered the criminal justice system from kind of like every angle over the past 30 years, and I'm just, I really enjoy my job. Being district attorney it's an incredible place to be. You get to see, you have a front seat to the world. It's a little different than being a police officer, but you get to see everything that's happening everywhere. And it's a job that if you do it correctly, no one's happy with you. If I do my job correctly, either someone is always going to be unhappy with me, either the police, either the victim, either the defendant, the judge. So that's how you know you're doing your job well, if someone's upset with you.
Yeah. So I guess every district attorney, when they take over, regardless of their predecessors' popularity or programs, has their own initiatives they'd like to bring forth. What are some of the things that you brought forth since you started, and to help the people here in Orange County?
Well, Chief, I think when I took over a very technologically challenged office. We didn't even have the internet really for everybody in 2014. First thing we did was we got the internet. I got to design a new office. So my mark is forever left in Orange County. When I first came in, because of Irene, I think it was Tropical Storm Irene and Lee. They had flooded the government center. There was plans to build a new government building. I came in right at the time that building was being designed. I got to design the DA's office. So the layout as it exists now on the 3rd and 4th floor of the government center is entirely my work. I realized the day we moved in that it was probably too small. But you do that, obviously you got tax dollars and whatnot, but so I've upgraded the facilities, I've upgraded a lot of the technology, and we have about 14 or 15 programs. We have programs that work in our schools, Connect to Disconnect, to basically help parents and children learn how to disconnect from drugs. We have a narcotics eviction program. We have a diversion program that we work with the chiefs of police here. We have a community prosecution unit where I have Darlene DeJesus Rosenwasser goes out, works with communities, because again, every community has to be handled a little differently.
And she was a guest, though, about a year ago, right? She was on, so people met her about a year ago.
Exactly. She's kind of like a connect with the local officials in the community. Those are just some. As I said, we got about 14 or so programs that we run. One of the big programs that I really had a lot of fun with over the last few years was the Uncommon Athlete, where we went into high schools and we focused on athletes, teaching them to be leaders in their schools, to stop bullying, to promote kindness, to basically have a better setting for the kids that are going to school. And I think up until the beginning of COVID, we got close to 6,000 kids through that program in Orange County. So we're hoping to start it back up again now that COVID is kind of lessening a little bit.
Sure. So you talk about technology. It's funny because the week after 9/11, and I was thinking about your predecessor, Frank Phillips. I actually, the morning of September 11th, I was a sergeant in the city of Middletown, and I had grand jury. And we were down in grand jury, and I was actually in Frank Phillips' office, which was the only office in the whole building that had a TV. And the TV was, I'm not joking, it was probably about double the size of these cards. And there was about 30 people all hovered around that TV. and we watched the one tower fall.
Funny thing, Chief Rickard, then Sergeant Rickard, I was in the room with
I don't
you.
even remember that.
Yes.
It's kind of funny, but it's not funny, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't remember who was there, but I just remember being in Frank Phillips, and only time I was ever in Frank Phillips' office, and I never would have had the need to, but I remember, and I was thinking about it when people said, people remember where they were at that moment, and I said, I'll never forget.
I remember the day better than you do. Actually, I had just left the grand jury shortly after 10 a.m. Noreen Kelderin, who was an ADA then, is now a judge in New Windsor, said to me, "Hey, Hooves, some guy crashed into the World Trade Center pilot." And my first response was, wow, the wind must have pushed him. I'm thinking a guy in a Cessna crashed into the building. Yeah. Then I proceeded to finish my case, walk back, and as you said, there was about 25, 30 people in a small room gathered around a TV that I think was a 12-incher back then.
It was teeny.
And back then, no cable either.
No, it was you could hardly see.
It was like Channel 4.
Right.
And I remember, I believe the weather reporter, Janice Huff was her name. I think she was on the air as one of the planes hit, and they kept replaying it and replaying it. Scary, scary times.
Yeah, and I think I've been in your current office, and you have like a 50-inch TV, and I think of, sometimes I've been in, I look at it, I was like, boy, I remember being Frank's little teeny TV.
The technology that we have in our office.
Amazing how it's changed. It's been 20 years, but it's it's crazy.
Yeah, I think we have seven smart boards in our office now.
It's amazing. Yeah, the technology. So it's not an easy job that you do. What's the most difficult thing in your job for you?
Well, there's two aspects to that. Dealing with people. I deal with, my staff fluctuates between 72 and 81. One set of that, about 45 or so attorneys. Then I have a support staff of secretaries that are unionized. And then I have a group of investigators that are unionized. Dealing with the people is often very difficult because you're dealing with people at different levels. You have young people, you have people in the middle of their career, you have people at the end of their career, you have people that just come to be the DA's office to get some experience and then leave. And they got to live their lives. So you're always dealing with, someone has a sick family member, somebody is on maternity leave, someone is sick with COVID, something happened. So that's one aspect, that just dealing with the people and trying to fill the holes. And I always try to be a people person. Maternity leave in my office, I give the 12 weeks and I tell all of the assistants, if you want to work from home for a little longer, go ahead. I try to make it as user-friendly as possible. So that's one aspect to that side. And then the other aspect is dealing with the cases. As I said, if you do your job right as a prosecutor, someone's always upset with you. Whether it be the police, whether it be the victim of a crime, whether it be the defendant's family, or whether it be the judge. You're never going to satisfy everybody, and you have to learn that very quickly. And there's a couple principles to prosecution that I think you're going to get me on the next question that apply to all of that. But I think at the end of the day, it's dealing with the people and all the issues you have with them, just managing an office. And then the other aspect of it is understanding what the job involves, that you're never going to make everybody happy.
So I don't know if people realize this when they think of going to court. You don't actually yourself physically go up and try a case at this point in your career. The DA is not doing that.
I actually have one case right now that I am involved with. Since I've been in office, I have been out on every police shooting that has happened under my tenure in Orange County. And I've handled all of them in the grand jury except one. The one I couldn't handle was in Port Jervis. So I still do handle that aspect of it. I do handle that aspect of it.
I didn't realize that.
No, and I am handling a case right now as a special prosecutor in Sullivan County, where I am the prosecutor. And I did handle one last year, a large-scale narcotics case in Montgomery, where over $1 million was recovered and a couple pounds of cocaine and some other stuff. I handled that. And occasionally, I assist with some cases. I still, do I miss going to the courtroom? I do. If I found a case that I really wanted to get my teeth into, I still would, because most people remember me. You remember when you were, I was in the courtroom all the time.
Right, yeah.
But you come a point where running the office,
too much.
and trying to go to court are just not compatible when you're dealing with the maternity leaves, the people that are sick, the paper's got to be bought, the oil in the car's got to be changed, this guy's got to be trained.
I get
it's you know, as a chief.
I know, and then I feel the same way sometimes, because you want to go out and do things and you hear about things, and then all of a sudden you're getting pulled in a million different directions. The town supervisor wants to know, why is this not done? And this one wants to know why this isn't done, and same thing.
And what I find,
unions on the phone.
I'll tell you another thing I find. Communities invite me to come out to things. And, some days I have 2, 3 things. It's hard for me to go to every single one of them. This county is 890 square miles. It's huge.
Yeah.
You just go from here in Mount Hope down to Tuxedo, or you go from Newburgh to Port Jervis. It's huge. So occasionally I got to send somebody in my place, and then people call back and they're like, "Why didn't you come out?" Whatever. I'm like, I can't. I can't be in Mount Hope at 10 and in Greenwood Lake at 11:15. It's not going to work.
And it's a diverse county too. Like the things, and we've spoken about this before. What happens in Mount Hope is so different than what happens in the city of Newburgh or even in Tuxedo.
You know what is unique? Other than Westchester, Orange County has the most municipalities of any county in the state of New York.
Wow.
We have 31 municipal police agencies. Over 43 police agencies handle this county. And all of them do it, as you know, all of them do it differently. You have the 3 cities that have their own way of doing things. Then you have all the other municipal departments. And your municipal departments, you have like Deer Park, they have 3, maybe 4 full-time guys and then 30 part-time.
They just hired 3 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone does it differently. So you have to, as the DA, the DA's office is basically the hub, and the police departments are all the spokes that go out, and the DA's office acts as the clearinghouse for all the information.
Gotcha. So it's election season. I know you're running, but you're running unopposed. So it's kind of diminishes this question a little bit, but why should people care about who the district attorney is? Like what is the,
Prosecution in its most basic form is 2 things. It's discretion and resources. There is no, and I'll go with the resources first. There is no possible way in Orange County, as I said, I have 45 assistant DAs, including myself. In a typical year, we handle about 20,000 cases pre-COVID. There is no possible way you can spend all the time that needs to be spent on every case. It cannot be done with 45 attorneys. So you have to use, so that's the resources you have available. You have a limited amount of resources. You have to tie in the resources you have and use discretion on what is going to be important. And how you do that is you try to pick as what is important. You know very well, Darlene De Jesus comes to you and we say, what is important to the people of Mount Hope? Like, what do we need to do here? And sometimes you say, well, people are speeding, people are this, people are that.
Right.
And obviously the issues that we get in Newburgh, people are selling drugs on the corner, they're entirely different. We try to match up the resources that we can allocate to what the people want to do. And it's a difficult job, but the reason why I would say me, I think, and I was just recently the president of the State Association, DA's Association, I actually was their prosecutor of the year this past year. I think even amongst all the DAs that are elected, we have 62 in the state of New York. I have a unique background. I was the only one that was ever a police officer, the only one that was ever a federal prosecutor, private practice, an ADA, both in the Bronx and Orange County, so city, suburban, and now as an elected DA. And I think my experience and my perspective, and I'll tell you, when I was the president of the DA's Association, I got it right before discovery, bail reform, all of these things happening, and I got to see the way it affected all the counties. And I always thought it was going to affect everybody somewhat the same. It really doesn't. It affected some of the smaller counties much worse than the larger counties. And in the larger counties, everything seems to be contested, but in the smaller counties, virtually nothing is contested when it comes to these reforms and things. So some of the things I thought it would be, it wasn't, but I think overall, if I was just going to say to people, why me? I think the level of experience, I think the track record, I think I've proven myself time and again that if it's important to the community, I'll do what I can to do it, make sure the outcome is correct. And again, the outcome is based on what the facts and circumstances are, not what the politics are, not what the people really want. It's whatever the evidence is, that's where we go with a case. And what the outcome is, again, if I do my job right, somebody's always upset.
Right. No, it's tough, and the fact that you're running unopposed, and I think goes to the point that the people think you're doing a good job. Because that's not always the case, and you see that all the time in other places. Who did you work for in the Bronx? Who was the DA?
Robert Johnson hired me.
Okay.
And when he hired me, it was a great conversation. I went in, and your first round interview was with a younger assistant. I went to that, and then I came back and I had an interview with 2 assistants. Then I got a panel interview with 3, and they were all 3 executives. One was a guy, Anthony Gerisi, an extremely learned attorney that worked in the Bronx. Another one was Tony Shepis, who was an executive, and the last one was Tom Leahy, who was the head of the Rackets Bureau. Being a police officer and going into being a prosecutor, the first thing they said to me was, "Can you prosecute a police officer?" I said, "If my mother breaks the law, I'll prosecute her."
Right.
And they were like, "Okay." And I got hired, and when I went for the final interview with Rob Johnson, basically, if they send you to the DA, essentially, as long as you don't say something stupid, you're being hired.
Right.
He said to me, he said, Mr. Hoovler, can I call you David? And I said, yes. And I said, Dave, I prefer. He goes, we're hiring you because I have a vision of putting you in a unit that prosecutes police officers that commit crimes. I said, hey, I'm good with that. Right. If that's what you want me to do, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And he did. He put me into that unit. Fast forward approximately, let's fast forward approximately 20 plus years later. When I become the president of the DA's Association, who was in the crowd but Tony Shepis,
wow,
one of the guys that originally recommended to hire me. And when I first get sworn in as DA in 2014, one of the first calls I get, January 3rd or 4th, is Rob Johnson saying, hey,
great.
Congratulations, welcome to the club. It's not always, he said it's not always going to be fun, it's not always going to be roses, and he says you're going to lose a lot of sleep and you're going to get gray hair. He was right to all of it.
Yeah. Now, he's not the DA anymore, is he a judge?
He's a judge, yeah, he's a judge. He left and went on to a judge, and I think he's getting very, very close to retirement.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing. When I first got elected, 3 district attorneys reached out to me, elected district. Rickard Brown, who's now deceased, from Queens, who I interviewed with his office. I did not get hired there. Rob Johnson obviously hired me. He called me. And a guy, Bill Fitzpatrick, up in Onondaga, called me. And the first thing they said was, hey, Bill Fitzpatrick said, hey, kid, anything you need, we got you. And same thing, Rickard Brown said the same thing, whatever you need, welcome to the club. And once you become an elected DA, what your political affiliation is, no one cares. Inside the DA's Association, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Conservative, Socialist, Communist, no one. It's never spoken. Because the only thing that matters is, did the person commit a crime? Can we prove it? And is this in the interest of public safety?
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I think that's reassuring to the people, that live here. So. Yeah. Now, what would you say was the most consequential case you've ever worked? Not as being the DA, but just as rank and file assistant.
I was in the DA's office here in Orange. Well, 2. I was on the Amadou Diallo case in the Bronx. Amadou Diallo was shot many times in 1999 by some New York City police officers. It turned out that the court even agreed, the jury agreed, it was a tragic accident. That was pretty significant. In Orange County, I got involved in a case in 2003 with a guy, state police investigator Will Garcia, and a FBI agent, Jim Asanio, that they had been working for about 2.5 years, a gang called the Ben Barrio Kings in Newburgh, that were responsible for about 90 violent acts over a 5-year period between 1998 and 2003. And they had just presented all their findings and everything to the U.S. Attorney's Office down in Manhattan, and the U.S. Attorney's Office wasn't thrilled with the case because It involved some drugs and some violence in the city of Newburgh, but it didn't involve crack cocaine. And if you recall, Paul, back in those days, crack cocaine got treated separately from powder cocaine. So they were kind of upset, and Will Garcia was in my office on another case, and he said he had this case, and I said, well, bring it to us. And they brought the case to us, and it started out, me looking over it. It took a couple months to understand what was going on with it. And essentially what it was a large-scale conspiracy of a group of individuals, a gang or an association of about 75 or 80 people that primarily were selling drugs, and they had a hierarchy of, they had an upper-level management group, and then they had the people that did everything. We wound up getting some wiretaps and some things, about a 9-month investigation, looking at the upper management, and the day came where we basically took it all down. We had about close to 300 police officers, search warrant locations. We arrested and charged the top 17 people, and I expected when we took that case down, there would be years of trials with these individuals. Now, again, the wiretaps were some of the best discussions ever. I mean, and it gives you some interest and insight into what the management people, all they wanted to do is make money by selling drugs. And their big problem is, just like being a manager that we have today, is some of the people underneath them were interested in the turf wars, were interested, and they didn't understand that the more crimes and things that they committed, the more spotlight they brought on them. The people at the top just wanted to make money. We were able to use the wiretaps and everything, and we got 17 convictions out of 17 that we charged, and I only had to do 2 trials.
It all comes down to management, right? No matter what it is, criminal enterprises, government, business, you got to manage people, right?
People is, and it's the hardest.
It's kind of funny when you think about it.
When it comes to managing people, I always try to find a way to say yes. Instinctively, a lot of times it's like, whoa, no, I'm not going. Then it's like, look, can I find a way? Like, I have an employee comes to me and says, hey, I know we start at, you got to be here at 8:30, but I got to get my kid on the bus. My husband works over here. I'm like, all right, come at 9:15, just stay to 5:30.
Right.
And that's how you get over these things. You just try to find a way to work with people. So I'd say that BBK case
was a good case.
Was a big, and that's over 20 years ago.
Do you find that, and I don't know how to even put this, do you work well with the different U.S. Attorney's Office? Is there conflict there? I can remember a case in Middletown, which was a sex case that, it was a rape case, and I remember the feds took the case, and I remember at the time Frank Phillips wasn't really happy with how the whole thing transpired. But is there a conflict there? You don't care? Is it kind of like they want it, have it?
Sometimes you care, sometimes you don't. Our interests are different. When I was a federal prosecutor, and I said at the beginning that I was a federal prosecutor, you only have a handful of cases as a federal prosecutor. You basically get to do everything you ever wanted to do on a case, and once you've done everything, you've crossed every T, dotted every I, you're like, I'm ready to go with this. As a state prosecutor, you take them as they come.
Gotcha.
And as a state prosecutor, one of my things in dealing with federal prosecutions now is, hey, if we got to get somebody, if this guy's a bad guy, we got to get him off the street now. We're going to take him off the street right now for that stabbing or that cutting, rather than let him stay there and continue to sell drugs so you can make a case 9 months from now in the federal court. So again, we work well together to the extent that we do. And again, I'm always there to support them. They're there to support us. And sometimes they have a better case. We give it to them. Sometimes we do. Gotcha. But our interests are always different.
Sure. That's interesting. So you talked about, some of the DAs that called you, but is there somebody that you would say is a professional mentor that's kind of helped you through the year? Like, who would be the most influential mentor that you've had?
Well, I'll tell you what. It all goes back to my parents, number one. And again, they're not like mentors as me as the DA, but my parents gave me a good sense of like, you got to work for what you got to get. You can't quit. And a lot of times you have to keep going. Like, I'll tell you my story about law school. I had a very difficult time getting into law school. And I don't know why. Now, my LSAT score was kind of middle of the road, but I had a lot of trouble getting in. But my father said to me, if it's what you want to do, just keep applying. Mm-hmm. And back then, every application was like $50, so you're losing money.
Yeah.
And I eventually got in, and I'll never forget the lady.
Where did you go to law school?
Michigan, Detroit College of Law at Michigan State.
Yeah.
The lady let me in. She said, "I eventually picked you off the waiting list because my husband's a cop." And she said, "I liked the background." And she said, "Just don't let me down." So the day that I graduated number 2 in the class, I said, "I didn't let you down, did I?" So my parents were key. But when it comes to law, I had a great mentor in the Bronx, Jeff Glucksman, and a guy, James Brennan. They're both still there. Brennan is a high-level executive. Glucksman is still a senior trial guy down in the trenches doing. Glucksman really taught me the nuts and bolts of how to try a case. He let me try cases. He let me make mistakes. Then he corrected me. He was a great learner. When it comes to other mentors, I'll tell you what. Ben Oster was a good friend of mine in Orange County. Still is. He taught me politics. Okay. How to do things in politics and how to handle that aspect. So he was very. Very influential. So I would say those people that I mentioned when it comes to it, and I think that kind of says it. My wife has always been a very strong force with me, in keeping me, this is where you got to go and this is how you got to get there.
Gotcha. So what's one lesson that you've learned over the career that's probably the one thing that you keep coming back to?
You can't quit. You can't quit. You have to keep going. No matter how difficult it gets, if my goal is to reach that wall over there, then I have to just keep going to get there. And you're going to suffer setbacks. You're going to have difficulties. And again, life is not fair in any aspect. Mm-hmm. So you have to remember all that. But you just keep going. And again, as you keep going, you kind of reevaluate a little bit each step of the way where you're at. But I think that's it. You keep, what is it in the Navy SEALs training or something? They say it pays to be a winner. Right. That life, it pays to be a winner. And most of the time, the people that win are just the people that have the mental fortitude to keep going, sure, even though things are tough.
Right. Well, that's an interesting perspective. You've done police work, lawyering, the DA. Is there an occupation out there that you'd like to try that maybe realistically you could try?
Well, I'm going to give you the unrealistic, and then I'll give you the realistic. Right. When I was like in 8th grade, a teacher was like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "Oh man, race car driver." I was like race car driver, helicopter pilot. Those were like the things I really thought. Maybe I was a very good pitcher. I was like maybe a professional baseball player, but all those things kind of went away.
Yeah.
I think if I could do a job today that totally away from law and all that, I'd like to be like an athletic director at a large university. Mm-hmm. I love athletics. I love high school athletics. I like college athletics. I watch professional stuff, but I like college because the atmosphere, the younger kids, high school and everything. It's student first, athlete setting. It's learning. It's learning how to win. It's learning how to lose.
Sure. And I'm with you. I mean, I have no interest in professional football, professional basketball. The only real professional sport is baseball. For some reason, that's the only one. But the college stuff. Yep. I mean, last week and the weekend before, one night you had Notre Dame and Florida State. The next night or the night before you had Clemson. And, it's like, wow, these are great. And
just look at the storyline at Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
The quarterback for Florida State, Mackenzie Milton, suffered one of the worst knee injuries ever. Yep. Didn't play for 3 years. Yep. Got a chance had to come back to a different university. Yeah. You don't get that anywhere else except in college and high school athletics.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. So I usually ask people what they're reading, so we'll mix it up a little bit. If there was a book that you could write, what would you write about? What would the book be about?
I might, 2 things I would say here. I could write a book about memoirs, about things I've seen and saw, and it would be a comedy, a tragedy, and a shocker all at the same time.
Okay.
But when I walk away from law enforcement and being a DA, I don't want any part of it. After that, I think if I could write a book, I think I'd write a book on golf course design.
Okay.
Only because I saw a golf course being built, and I never realized like how much earth you have to move, and I never realized the vision that the guy had to like envisioning how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
Like looking out at a forest of nothing but trees, and then the next thing you know, you look 5 years later, and you're like, wait a minute, like those 4 trees over there stayed, and there's a hill here, and there's a creek there. So I think I'd do that.
So who is the best golfer in your family?
Oh, yeah, the best golfer in my family has to be my youngest son by far.
Okay. He
He plays collegiately, actually just went to his first college tournament, did fairly well, finished in, I think, the top 15 for freshmen. It was me for the longest time.
Oh, okay.
All of my children, my daughter was a volleyball player, my middle son came out of the womb as a quarterback. He still plays quarterback in college to this day. And my youngest son was also a quarterback. They were the quarterbacks at Burke Catholic for almost 6 years, 2 of them, back to back. And but my youngest son took up golf when he was in like 5th grade. By the time he got to like, and he was only playing a little bit with me. By the time he got to like 7th grade, I was like, he's going to take me eventually. And then it happened overnight, like in 9th grade.
That's funny.
Just because he can hit the ball so far,
Yeah.
and occasionally I still get him, but most of the time he has to make a big mistake.
And we played in a golf tournament, I don't know, it's probably a year ago now, and you were with playing with Glenn Plotsky, and he was just so excited that he was on your team that he played better than you, and he was just that day. And people know Glenn is the town attorney here, one of the town attorneys here in Mount Hope. So.
I play as pretty much a pretty standard 8-9 handicap.
Okay.
Been that for the last 10 years or so. On a good day in an actual tournament, I have shot par.
Gotcha.
So I still have the game. It's just to be good at golf, you got to play a lot.
Yeah.
And playing a lot isn't just running out and going to like the charity tournament and whatever.
You have to go out. Driving range.
You got to go out. You got to concentrate on what you're doing. You can't answer the phone every 2 seconds.
No. And my kids, and we've spoken about this, they're both in high school now, and they play. They love the game, and they're out all the time. And the place we normally play, they were closed for aeration last week. So they're like, you got to find us another course. So I sent them to Hickory Hill.
Yeah.
So they went out to the county course at Hickory Hill, and they found that interesting. Is
Its nickname is Helmet Hills because the holes go up and back, so people are always hitting into you. But greatest thing about golf for your kids, it's something they can do now. It's something they can do when they're 20. It's something they can do when they're 40, and it's something they can do when they're 90.
Yeah, it's true. It's awesome. So we have a little bit of a lightning round here. We just try to ask you some questions and see if you can come up with a quick answer. So ready?
Yep.
Last movie you saw in a theater?
Avengers Endgame.
Okay. Favorite holiday?
4th of July.
Favorite day of the week?
Friday.
All right. Texting or talking on the phone?
Talking, way better.
All right. Invisibility or super strength? Invincibility or super strength, I'm sorry.
Well, invincibility, that's an easy one.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Dave. It was great. I think people learned a lot, and I learned a lot actually sitting here listening. And I think the whole purpose of this is so the community can learn a little bit about their leaders.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you giving me this nice
we'll
mug.
Go to the mug.
And Paul, you've been a mainstay in law enforcement here in Orange County for the last 25 years, even more than that.
30 years.
30 now.
Crazy.
And appreciate everything you do, and I hope the public appreciates what you do. It's a tough job, and it's been the last couple of years has been very tough. So make sure you stay safe, and make sure that your people stay safe.
I appreciate it, Dave.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
So everybody, thanks for joining us. And this was Dave Hoovler, the Orange County District Attorney, September edition of Coffee with the Chief, and we'll see you next month.